Welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast, your home for weekly information and inspiration to help you get the graduate job of your dreams.
Hello and welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast with your host, James Curran. The Graduate Job Podcast is your weekly home for all things related to helping you on your journey to finding that amazing job. Each week I bring together the best minds in the industry, speaking to leading authors, entrepreneurs, coaches and bloggers who bring decades of experience into a bite-sized weekly 30-minute show. Put simply, this is a show I wish I had a decade ago when I graduated. In episode 36 of the Graduate Job Podcast, we niche down as we delve into what you need to do to get a job in the field of property, with special guest and property guru Rob Bence. If property is your thing, we have all of the bases covered, but if not, don't worry, you're still going to want to keep listening as Rob shares some absolute dynamite insights into how to get any job. We cover the difference between A and B players and why B players' applications end up in the bin. What to say to an employer when you're applying for an internship or work experience to ensure you get a yes. Why and how you can reverse engineer the job application process so you know exactly what the interviewer is looking for, through to why you should never carpet bomb job applications. No matter where you are in the application process, this is an episode which you aren't going to want to miss. As always, all links to everything we discuss and a full transcript are available in the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/property. Don't forget to get in touch as well by email or Twitter. On Twitter, I'm at gradjobpodcast, and my email is hello@graduatejobpodcast.com. Let me know what you love, people or companies you'd like to see in the show. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts, so send everything my way. But now, without further ado, let's go straight to episode 36.
I'm joined by podcasting royalty today, entrepreneur, multiple business owner, leading podcaster, and importantly for today, all-round property guru. Rob Bence, welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast.
Thanks, James. The money's in the post. It's very kind. Wasn't expecting that intro.
Well, today we're going to explore the area of property and what graduates need to do to get a job in property. So, first thing first, Rob, would you like to tell us in more detail a little bit about yourself and how you came to be in the property game?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in property just over 10 years now. I'll be honest, it's always been something I was interested in, and when the opportunity came to apply for a role in property, which was for a builder at the time, I went for it. There was about, as we're talking about interviews and getting jobs today, and graduates, I'll take you through the process. I remember it being a room full of people. I'll say 50, but it at the time felt like more like 100. It was a packed room, and that was their first stage interview. They had a room full of people, so I made an effort to stand out. I made sure I asked questions, could offer value when I could during that process. Got through to the smaller group interview and then one-on-one interviews, and ended up working for a national developer, but they focused in the northwest mainly and a few other regions. So I worked there. That was really rewarding, really got to understand property from a builder's perspective. And I ended up working with investors because this was pre-crash. So we're going back a few years now, as I say, it's 11 years ago. So I was working pre-crash and working with investors who would buy up lots of property, and I found it really interesting. So interesting that I actually then moved to a property investment company still up north on Merseyside, worked there for a few years before moving to London to work for another property investment company, sort of another level up again, ended up managing that and then left to set up my own company, which began with, as you mentioned, there's a few now, but the first one was RMP Property.
Excellent. And property is one of those funny industries where there doesn't seem to be a set career path. So it's not like, say, medicine or law or something like that. And people tend to come into it in different ways. And you mentioned RMP there, and I know your other company, Yellow Lettings, has been hiring people recently. And I'd love to get some of your experience of what the hiring process was like for people coming on board to Yellow Lettings. So what sort of people were you looking for when you put those job adverts out?
So we have, strictly speaking, three businesses. We have our content business, which is the property hub. We have a lettings business, which is Yellow Lettings, and a property investment company called R&P Property. Everybody who works for Yellow Lettings and for the Property Hub works remotely. So they work from home, essentially, or from co-working space. There are no offices for those people. R&P does have an office in central London, so there's people at desks in that office. So we have different approaches, obviously, because we have different type of working environments. But what we do have is a very systemized approach to attacking, really, the job process, because while it's hard for people going for job roles, it's hard for people who advertise them as well, because there's so many people applying, so you need really good processes. So we start off with an application form. That weeds a lot of people out. Then we go to an audio recording, where we ask people a question and ask them to leave a recording. And then, obviously, that will weed more people out. Then we go to group interviews. Then we go to one-on-one interviews. In between those two stages, we'll do some profiling tests to understand their personalities a bit more. Then we'll go to references, and then probably a final interview to discuss the job itself and make sure we're a great fit before we shake hands on the role.
Well, there's quite a few stages there. And the audio recording sounds interesting. What were you looking for from the audio recording? So
the whole point behind the audio answer is telephone interviews do take a while to go through, so it just quickens the process, because on a telephone interview as an interviewer whether this person's going to work or not pretty quickly, or has the potential to work. So the audio interviews just allows the person who leaves the message to get it over and done with quite quickly and make an impression or not very quickly. And for us, it allows us to sift through the candidates a little easier as well. So it's just all about efficiency.
No, that's completely true. I know when I've been doing telephone interviews, and as you said, within the first minute, or just even how people answer the phone and their attitude, and whether they're going to be a yes or a no, and then to have to go through the half hour worth of questions, could be quite painful.
Yeah, absolutely. We learn from the pain.
And did you specify what sort of message you wanted them to record, or was it quite open?
No, we have a specific question. So it'll be a question that allows them to shine, or the opposite, completely flop. So it's a deliberate question. We think about it before we put it out there. It's interesting. Some people put a lot of effort in, and some people, even though they've bothered to leave a message, don't. Some people think about the question and put effort into their answers, and others don't. And that's the beauty of it. It allows us to sift through people pretty quickly.
And I'm guessing that you're looking for people who do make the effort and, are positive and enthusiastic in how they leave the message.
Absolutely.
And you talked about the application form before that. What sort of things were you looking for in the application form?
Again, effort. You'll be amazed at the amount of people who just write one line. So we'll ask them a question, which we don't give any limit or guidelines on how much they should write. Some people will really go to town and put a lot of effort in, and others will literally write a sentence or even a few words. So it's very easy to get rid of the people who will write a few words or a sentence or two. You look at the people who put effort in, decide whether it's waffle or quality, and then move them forward. And obviously looking at the quality standard.
Do find, lots of people do mistake quality with waffle, and they see a box and decide they need to fill it and just fill it with superfluous information. So moving on then to the group interview, what would that be like? Would that be a group exercise of people working together, or?
No, actually, the group interview is a two-way process. So it's an opportunity for us to talk very honestly about the role that we have in hand, but also for the people to really rule themselves out as well. The worst thing you can do is go and start in a role and realise pretty quickly that this place, this company, this environment, or the role itself isn't for you. So while we're not downbeat, we're just very open and honest about what the company is like, what we are like as a team, and what the role is like. And we give them the opportunity to say, hey, we'll contact you after this, but let us know if it's not for you. We could give them the opportunity to walk away from the process. And I say that to them, you don't want to work in a company you don't like, so we've got to make sure we're a good culture fit. So it's a very open conversation. What happens is I'll tend to run through the company. I'll go through a few bits and pieces, what it's like to work from. I'll often take quotes from other team members and just copy and paste word for word, language, whatever it says. It might be more colourful, but I'll put it in there and get the people in the room understanding what we're like as a team. And then they'll know, whether we're right or not for them. And then I'll open it up to Q&A, and that's really where we'll be able to assess the people and their interest. And I have observers in the room, so they're looking at their body language, how engaged they are, the type of questions they're answering, the type of questions they have themselves, and the quality of those questions. And then I'll sit down with the observers afterwards, and then we'll make a short list of who we want to move through to the next part of the process.
Well, and I'm guessing as you move from the group interview stage to the one-to-one stage, you really whittle down literally thousands and thousands of applicants to, 10, 20, would it be?
Oh, no, one-on-one interviews, I never like to take more than 5.
Oh, wow, okay.
So, yeah, we're pretty ruthless getting through, but it hopefully means that we get the right candidate.
Yep. And for those 5 people that you got through to the one-on-one stage, were there any common characteristics or experiences amongst them?
The thing they have in common is that they have gone out their way to stand out in one way or another throughout the process. So in their CV, they've made effort. In their application form, they've made effort. When they've left their audio recording, they've asked good questions or made good comments. When all through the process, they've put that a little bit more in and showed that they're an A player. So you look for A players, you don't want B or C players in the business. The type of questions that they're asking, B players will ask questions like, how many days off a year do you get? Or what's the start date? Or things like that. And A players are asking, if I came in within 6 months, what would an A performance look like? What could I do to stand out? What could I do to actually exceed your expectations? Where are the weaknesses in your business? What can we improve on? What systems don't you have in place in this role? What systems do you have in this role? Really asking really intelligent questions that show you care about the business and care about the role. Because if those people do care about the business, then they're probably going to be really good employees, because they're already thinking about how they can make an impact, and they want to make an impact. They don't want to be a passenger. They want to make a difference.
I love that. I love the difference, categorizing them to A and B players, and I think it's something that holds for no matter what company you're applying for, because you do see people coming in and the first question they ask is, how much am I going to get paid? And you just think straight away that it's not going to go well. And you talked about standing out. We've got a special coming up in a few weeks on creative applications. Were there any specific creative ones that you can remember that really made you think wow when you came across them?
I think with an application or a CV, your first paragraph is going to make it or break it for you. That's really going to help people decide whether to, because you think about it, as you said, we get hundreds, if not thousands of applicants. So it's those first few lines that are going to make a difference. I can tell you what I used to do, if that helps. I think my last job, I wrote something on the lines of, and this is not word for word, but something on the lines of, I run marathons, I've climbed some of the highest mountains in the world, I read ferociously, blah, blah, blah. I put loads of achieving stuff outside of work environment. And then I said, and I applied exactly the same work ethic and sense of adventure in the workplace. Something on those lines. And I can not remember never being called back for the next stage when I was applying for my final role at the time. And I got the job I wanted, my dream job. It's looking to stand out, show the people that you're trying to work with that you're an achiever. Show them that you've done stuff that's above the norm. Now, you don't have to go and start climbing the highest mountains in the world or run marathons to do that. I remember one of the best team members I've got talked about how she worked within a charity and organised an event over Christmas for homeless people. It was really, really impressive, but she went into detail as well. She didn't just say what she did. She went into detail how she coordinated it and the difference she made. And the fact that, she spent part of her Christmas doing that, giving her free time to making that happen, was super impressive. So, you don't have to go crazy, but do something to show that you're an achiever, that you're an A player, that you do a bit more than a normal person. If you're passionate about learning, make sure you show that, demonstrate it by telling them that you listen to podcasts. The fact that you're listening to this today shows that you probably are a cut above than the average applicant because you're trying to be better. Tell them that you listen to podcasts, the type of podcasts you listen to, especially if they're industry relevant. Tell them the books that you've read that you think that'll make you a better applicant. Show them that you're just not run-of-the-mill. Show them that you're an achiever.
I love that opening statement, Rob. And yeah, I guess in the future you might be getting a few people who've, when they apply to you, have copied it and playing it back to you.
Yeah, if it's word for word, I might be suspicious.
So, focusing again on the one-to-one interview, so you got 5 people down. How do you then begin to decide between the 5?
Okay, so we use a method called top grading, which is better described in a book called Who. I'm happy to recommend a book. It's called Who, a method for hiring. That's what it's called. Really simple title, and it's put together by 2 guys called Jeff Smart and Randy Street. And the book is really, really good. But I'd actually advise anybody applying for a role to buy this book, because you can reverse engineer the process. You can think about how the interviewer is approaching interviews. Now, they might not be using this exact process, but if you can understand this process, which is getting more commonplace now, then you're going to be a better applicant throughout the process by understanding the type of things employers are looking for. It might not be stage for stage of what Who describes, but I'm sure many of the concepts will be there. So if you understand that process, then I think you'll be a lot better off. But to dig into a little bit, we run through the CV. We ask if there's job experience, several questions about each role they've been in. We go right back through their work history, what successes, what failures, why they left. We'll break through the CV, then we'll go into general questions. We'll discuss their profile test results. It's minimum an hour and a half, normally 2 hours for the right candidates.
Brilliant advice about reverse engineering it. Nobody's ever recommended that before, but it makes complete sense.
I'd actually go one further. If you're applying for jobs, reverse engineer the process again. When you're looking at the role, don't think about you. Put yourself in the shoes of the people who are trying to fill that role. List out the qualities they're probably looking for, and list out the skills they're looking for and the experience. Now, you might not have it all, but if you can identify the key attributes, then you can mold your approach to it that way. So if you're serious about a role, then I would take the time to list out the attributes of their ideal candidate. And if you are that person, then great. Make sure you really emphasize those qualities, but you actually might rule yourself out the role as well to say, actually, this person is the complete opposite of me, so I'm not going to waste my time going through this process. But I would really take that time to think about their ideal candidate and see if that is you or close to you, and then emphasize those points throughout the process.
Brilliant advice again, and yeah, completely recommend that. It would certainly stand you in great stead, and so many candidates just don't think about it. All they think about is what they want from the process, as opposed to what the employer is looking for from the process. You talked, Rob, about experience. How important was experience and previous work experience for you with the candidates you were looking for?
It has some importance, but actually many of the people we've hired haven't had direct property experience if they're not advising. So if they're not in an advising role, so say they're in marketing, or they're admin, or they're ops, or whatever it may be, I've never really had an issue if they have no property background. It's really transferable skills and attitudes to work, and what they've done in their career is more important. The only time I've ever really wanted some experience in property is when they're going to be directly advising our clients, which is obviously a little bit different. I want experts. So that's the only time I'll ever look for direct experience. But just showing that you've done well in those roles in your CV, telling me you've worked there is fine. But what did you do there? What did you achieve there? What difference did you make there? That's more important. So if you can demonstrate that in your CV, you're going to, again, stand out.
And how can listeners, would you recommend, best make use of, say, internships or work experience in a property environment? Do you find many property companies such as yourselves will be open for people coming along and doing work shadowing or internships to get experience to add to their CV?
I think a lot of property companies would be open to it, myself included. But what you have to remember as a candidate is people who run businesses tend to be quite busy. I'm very time poor. So having somebody, I actually get a lot of emails of people saying, can I come and work in your office for free? Which you may think would be appealing, but actually I think it's effort. I've got to find work for you to do. What are you going to do day to day? How am I going to train you? What would be a better approach, and something that would really appeal to me, and I'm sure a lot of other business owners, is someone who, again, takes the extra step and says, I want to come in, and this is what I want to do, and this is how it will benefit you. So thinking about the person you're approaching again, So, right, they probably haven't got a lot of time. They probably get a lot of emails like this, and they probably think it's too much hassle. So how can I overcome those objections? By telling the person you're approaching exactly what you're going to do, what difference you're going to make, and how easy it will be for them. We'll go, wow, one, this sounds great, and two, this person's really switched on. Let's have a chat.
I love that, and yeah, you could definitely see that working. I mean, in your business, are there any situations where you're thinking specifically that it would be great if someone did email you and say, oh, I'll come in and help out your online marketing or your click online Google AdWords, or is there anything at the moment that you need that help in?
I mean, we're growing really fast, so we need help in every direction. We're hiring fast at the moment. I mean, across the businesses, we've got just over 10 now people. In the next 12 months, we'll be over 20, and that's, I think, being conservative. We're growing. All the businesses are growing fast, which is fab. But because of that, we need skilled people. But we're time poor as well as we fill those roles. So if somebody comes in and says, hey, I can make a difference this way, even if we've got someone doing that role, if they're very clear on how they'll make a difference, then we might bring them in.
And thinking wider around property and university, would you recommend that people, if they're interested in property and they know they're interested in property from a young age, do a property-related degree or a more vocational course, or if they know that property is the road they want to go down, to save themselves lots of money in debt and just to start working straight after university for a property company to get that hands-on experience?
In terms of the type of degrees, well, it's nice to see a property degree because it shows you have some passion. If you haven't got the right skill sets or attitudes, you're going to fall away during the process. If you've got another degree and you've done well in it, and you can show the right skills and attributes in your personality and your approach to work, then you'll get the job. So, well, it's a nice to have, but far from essential. In terms of getting into property, I went to university. I went twice, but I left twice. So I got into property. Probably not the best person to interview. I got into property clearly without a degree. University, the process just wasn't for me, and that's fine. For some people, it works really well for. Property is one of those industries that you don't have to have a degree. A doctor, you can't just stand up at the hospital, start mucking in, and then suddenly you're a surgeon. It's not going to work out that way. But property, you can rise to the top if you show the right attitude, work ethic, and skills. It can happen. It's down to the individual. So that's one of the nice things about the industry, that degrees can possibly help, but they're not essential.
And go back to your previous point, my old boss used to say he hired on attitude and not skills. You can teach skills, but you can't teach attitude.
Yeah, so true.
So moving on then, Rob, so we've covered how to get into property as an industry. As a common theme, it's been in the news. It's in the news every week in terms of buy-to-let property. 1 week buy-to-let property is the must-invest way to make money. Other weeks, it's the buy-to-let market is gonna crash. I know there's lots of listeners out there who are interested in maybe buying their first buy-to-let property. What advice would you give someone who's maybe coming out of university, just started work, or doing a job that they want to maybe move on from? How can they begin to get involved in owning a rental property when they don't know where to start?
I'd say educate yourself. That's the first thing to do in property investment. Don't just go in and think, right, I'll start throwing bids in on this and away you go. I think educating yourself and decide on what you want. Why are you going into this? Yes, it can be fun. Yes, property can be exciting. But have a very focused end goal in sight. I want to get into property because I wanted to do this for me. And then you can build a strategy around that goal. So I would get very focused on the outcomes you want to achieve, medium and long term. And then I would start building a strategy around it. And then, of course, to build that strategy, you're going to need to educate yourself. And that's, like Rob, my podcast partner on the Property Podcast, and the Property Hub, which is a forum, which is all free education. We're really passionate about education and helping people to better themselves when it comes to the subject of property. And I think really there's no excuse these days not to educate yourself. There are courses out there and some of them are expensive, but you can pick up 99% of the knowledge for free. So there's no excuses. Educate yourself, have a very clear vision on what you want to achieve, and then build a strategy around it.
And I would highly, highly recommend Rob's 3 podcasts now, but particularly the property podcast. If you've ever thought about getting involved in owning property, then this is the place to start. It'll take you from complete beginner status through to some very technical and interesting ways to make money with property. But yeah, it is highly, highly recommended. So Rob, unfortunately time is running away with us, but before we finish, let's move to our weekly staple questions that we have with each guest. So starting with, what one book would you recommend that our listeners read?
Well, I'm going to be greedy because I've named one already, which is Who. So I really recommend that book. But How to Win Friends and Influence People is another book I'd highly recommend. The title may sound a little off-putting. Don't be. It's a very, very good book at just how to handle yourself day to day, the skill set socially you should have. A very, very good book. A book I gift a lot, actually. Probably insulting people when I hand it to them. You need to read this. But no, particularly younger people. When I read that book, it actually probably matured me by a good few years. I realised what a bit of an idiot I was, and realised how to become a better person. It had a big impact on me, that book. Unfortunately found it a long time ago, and I gift it a fair bit now.
Completely recommend that. It's a great book, and it will definitely get you thinking about the ways that you interact with other people. But yeah, as you said, if you did give me the book, I'd begin to wonder why exactly you were giving me it. And the next question, Rob, what website would you recommend that our listeners visit?
It's a difficult question. If you're interested in property, then obviously I'm going to say the propertyhub.net. But I would go and look at the type of websites that people who are hiring are going to look at. So profile tests, so Talent Dynamics, that's a profiling system we use. I'd be looking at that. I'd be looking at DISC, which is another profiling test. I'd be looking at typing in how to find good employees, hiring processes, as I said, reverse engineering, understanding the people opposite the desk, understanding the people in the office that you want to be in. I think I'd spend a lot more time doing that. So I would be going on those type of websites, going on blogs that talk about how to find the best candidates. And it's almost like you've got inside access to how we're thinking. That's the approach I would take.
I love it. And that's, again, I've not really thought about doing it from that way, but now it makes perfect sense. And finally, Rob, what one tip would you give our listeners that they can implement today on their job hunt?
Don't carpet bomb applications. So many people do this. 90%, probably higher, do this, where they'll do the minimum during the application process to the beginning and hope they get through. Think about it. If an employee is going to move you forward off the minimum effort and a carpet bomb CV that is generic and not tailored at all to the job you're going to, then if they're taking you through, what type of role and what type of company is that? Yes, the roles I'm talking about in the companies I represent are hard to get, but think about the quality of people we've got in there already because everyone else has gone through that process. So that should excite you that it's difficult to get through. If it's easy and you've done minimal effort and you're finding yourself going through the process, that's an alarm bell to me. So what I would do is I would pick 10 jobs, maybe less, that you really, really like the look of and go all out. Create that profile of the ideal candidate they're looking for. Show that you're above the norm by demonstrating that in your personal life you've been an achiever. Go to that extra effort. Show them that you can do that and really put a lot of effort into a small number of applications than just hammer hundreds and thousands of jobs. That's what I would do.
I love it, and you can just recognise so quickly and so easily when someone has just, as you said, carpet bombed an application. I mean, sometimes they don't even remember to change the name of the company that they're applying to on their application, and it just it's so easy to see when they've just been cut and pasted one application to another, and they just go straight in the the bin. So yeah, make sure you're not doing that, listeners. Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. You've left some amazing insights. Before we finish, what is the best way for listeners to get in touch with you and your businesses?
I'd say if you want the podcast, you can go to propertypodcast.com, the forums, thepropertyhub.net. I'm not massively active on social networks, but the one I'm on the most is Twitter, and it's at Rob Bence, Bence, at Rob Bence.
Rob, thank you very much for appearing on the Graduate Job Podcast.
That's been my pleasure, James. Thanks for having me.
Many thanks to Rob Bence. After listening to his property podcast for so long, it's a pleasure to have him on mine. He gave so many great points that it's difficult to pick out just 3, but here goes. The first is related to his point about carpet bombing job applications, by which he meant the process of sending the same application or CV to multiple employers. As he mentioned, it's not just difficult to apply for jobs, it's equally as difficult to be on the other side hiring and trying to wade through hundreds or thousands of probably quite ropey applications to find the best. As such, employers put opportunities throughout the process for you to rule yourself out. Did you enter a one-line answer on the application form? Yes, in the bin. Did you not do the video application, or did you do it badly? In the bin. As Rob said, he's looking for A players who go out of their way to make themselves stand out. People who put the extra work, effort and ultimately thought which stands them out from the crowd, and as he described it, makes them an A player. To do this though takes time, which is why you need to be selective with what you apply to. Hence, no carpet bombing. No cut and pasting the same answers for each online application, or sending the same CV without tailoring it to 50 employers, and then wondering why you didn't hear back from any of them. So be sure to be selective. Choose a few jobs you really want to go for and put the effort in to stand out and make sure that you are marked out as an A player. The second takeaway for me is on reverse engineering the process. I loved Rob's idea of going to the same source that the recruiters will be using. In his case, the book Who, the A method for hiring. Instead of thinking about what it is that you want, you need to spin that thinking round into what is it that the company wants and is looking for. A few weeks ago, we had Ivan Wise, recruitment director for the graduate scheme Think Ahead, on the show. He mentioned there's 7 attributes that Think Ahead has, and how they specifically look for each of these from each candidate throughout the application process. Now, if you've taken the time to think about reverse engineering the process, you can make sure that each of these attributes is front and centre throughout your online application. So then, it's an easy decision for the recruiter to say yes. The final takeaway for me was Rob's advice on how to stand out when it came to applying for work experience or internships. As he said, anyone you apply to in this regard is going to be time poor, so the perspective of you turning up and getting in the way isn't going to be too appealing. Again though, make it easy for them to say yes. Take the extra step and specify what exactly you want to do for them and how it will benefit them. Think about what their objections will be and then nullify them in that initial approach. Put this extra thought in and stand out as an A player, and they won't be able to say no. So there you go, episode 36 put to bed. If you've enjoyed the show, please let me know on Twitter. My handle is @GradJobPodcast, or email me at hello@graduatejobpodcast.com. And please do leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher Radio. As I say every week, it's the best way, other than sharing us with your friends, to show appreciation for the podcast. And it helps massively in the rankings so that other people can find us. Now I do hope you enjoyed the episode today, but more importantly, I hope you use it and apply it. See you next week.